worldwide outrage continues to grow over the death of George Floyd at the hands of police in Minneapolis in the United States. An African-American, Floyd was filmed saying, "I can't breathe," as a white police officer knelt on his neck. A day of action against discrimination is also being held in London currently, where thousands earlier gathered in Hyde Park and marched to Parliament Square. Let's go live to London now, where SABC correspondent Holly Hudson is. Very good evening to you, Holly. It's been quite a couple of hours now. The protest or demonstration has moved from Hyde Park to Parliament Square. A large turnout, it seems, in solidarity with protesters in the United States.
Yes, certainly. As you said, worldwide anger over the death of George Floyd has spread across the globe and here in the UK. The protests still very much in full swing. As you can see behind me here, people underneath Big Ben crowded around the Nelson Mandela statue, holding signs saying Black Lives Matter, justice for George Floyd. Cries of justice and chants that the UK isn't innocent have been held here throughout the day. And as you can hear, as people condemning President Trump, people very angry over his reaction to George Floyd's death in the United States, already a controversial figure here in the UK. And thousands of people turned out for these protests today to, as they say, stand in solidarity side by side with those in the US over George Floyd's death. But it's about much more than that now here in the UK. While George Floyd's death was essentially a catalyst for this movement, people here feel that the UK has its own racial injustices to confront, and the organisers say that what has happened in America has really refocused attention now onto the injustices here in the UK. They're calling for accountability and action over things that they feel here constitute institutional racism. And I should note that just less than a mile down the road at Downing Street, Boris Johnson is currently holding the daily Downing Street press briefing on the coronavirus, and we did hear his first comments over the death of George Floyd in Parliament earlier when he was quizzed by the leader of the main opposition party, Labour, Sir Keir Starmer. He said he was appalled by George Floyd's death and that he perfectly understands people's right to protest, but he wanted them to do so in a lawful and reasonable way. And I should point out that so far, while the atmosphere has been electric here, people are clearly very angry. Things have stayed peaceful. There's a big police escort, dozens of officers on standby, but no unrest as yet. They do, of course, have the powers now to break up gatherings or fine people and arrest people breaching restrictions on movement that are still in place. The UK is still under lockdown here, so people are defying those guidelines, breaking those rules to come out and protest. But organisers say they can't stand by and stay at home when a crisis is unfolding.
Holly, you did say that it seems to be a demonstration to highlight racial inequalities and brutality within the police in the UK as well. I mean, what are the protesters saying about that? You said this is a catalyst, but, you know, some of these issues which they say are also happening in the United States, have they called on the government there to address these, as those in the United States are calling for some kind of action relating to the death of George Floyd?
Yes, certainly. People here see that there are still racial and social injustices that the government needs to confront, and those feelings have been heightened, tension stoked, compounded by a report released yesterday by the government, Public Health England, which had showed that black and ethnic minorities are disproportionately affected by COVID-19, up to twice as likely, some BMA communities likely to die from the virus. People here very angry about that. There have been calls on the government to act and to do more to protect families who, some MPs say, now living in fear, don't know how to protect themselves. There's also anger. I've seen several banners over a lady called Belly Majunga. She was a railway worker, a black railway worker, who was spat at by a man who said he had COVID-19. Police have now closed that case, saying that there was no evidence to link what happened with Benny Majunga's death, but people here calling for justice over that and several other cases too. This really has stoked tensions and racial and social injustices here that people have felt for some time.
Holly, just finally, I mean, you already indicated, I mean, these protests around the world are also taking place during the time of COVID-19 and strict restrictions in different countries. Are there any concerns that, as the coronavirus continues to ravage the world, including the UK, these mass gatherings could increase the infection numbers?
Yes, certainly. It's interesting to note that the Black Lives Matter UK group, the umbrella group for the Black Lives Matter movement here in the UK, has actually not held any protests. They say that there is a bigger risk to life being caused by the pandemic, so they're not actually calling protests yet. These have been organised by a group of young black activists, the London Black Lives Matter movements. And there is concern, of course, as mass gatherings are still banned here in the UK, that this could increase rates of infection, but the organisers have been very cautious, very keen to try and urge people to be safe, wear masks, wear gloves. I've seen people with megaphones directing people in one-way directions, so as to try and adhere to social distancing measures as much as possible. But of course, it's impossible in this situation.
Holly, thank you very much indeed. As the protest against the death of George Floyd spread in London, of course, those scenes behind Holly there. Holly Hudson live for us from London.